Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin, and this is Levin TV, the Best Of series, part 2 of our Robert Reich show. And given that Robert Reich is short, I'm going to do a short introduction.
This is where freedom reigns.
If you believe in America, if you believe in the Constitution empowers us. It's a new day. America's back. America's back, and America's going to get strong again. We're going to defend America, and we're going to defend our interests.
Liberty's voice, Levin TV.
You know, Robert Reich has been invited on this program, and he won't come. He says he has an exclusive with CNN. I must confess, is he on CNN? I don't know. But he is a radical leftist. As you know, he worked with Obama and Gore, and he worked with Clinton, and but he's way out there, and he's a professor, of course. And he doesn't think the Democrats are going far enough. He doesn't think they're going fast enough. And this is typical with Marxism, quite frankly, or any form of totalitarianism. You just haven't done enough. You haven't tried enough. You haven't stolen enough property. You haven't seized enough liberty. You haven't built a big enough Leviathan, because Marxism / whatever ism you want to call it cannot work. It's not only impracticable, it's impossible. Meanwhile, look at all the bodies strewn all over the place, left and right, throughout the history of this ideology as it's been imposed on one country after another. The great proletariat's going to rise up. The great proletariat never rises up. It is the elitists, most of whom have gone to college, most of whom are lawyers or what have you. They're the ones trying to foment revolution. They're the ones who want to take control of the country. They're the ones who want to impose their elitist views on the rest of the nation, not just ours, other nations. It has nothing to do with the people. They claim they do these things for the people. You grow the government, you centralize the government, you steal money from one person to give it to another person. That's not for the people. That's for the thieves, that's for the thugs, that's for the people who run these entities and these regimes. Look at who they are. You have Castro, you have Maduro, you have Xi. You can go right through the list. These are thugs. These are totalitarian fascists / Marxists. That's what they are. Why would you surrender the greatest nation on the face of the earth for these failed experiments? Even 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% of these failed experiments. Why do that? Anyway, that's laying the foundation. I have no idea what Robert Reich is going to say. Our folks here said you really ought to listen to this and unravel it. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. All right, go.
The political window of opportunity for Joe Biden and Democrats to deliver on their promises to the American people and pass the legislation the country needs could close at any time. We must understand how rare it is that the Senate and the House and the presidency are all under the control of the Democratic Party. That's happened in only 4 of the past 28 years. The Democrats' current Senate majority would end with a shift of a...
Hey, stop. They don't have a Senate majority. It's 50-50. Thanks to our Constitution, which he and others hate for the most part, Kamala Harris is the swing vote as the president of the Senate. Basically, the vice president has a couple of responsibilities: to sit there as president of the Senate if she wishes, and she does when they have a tied vote, to go to funerals, and to empty the spittoons in the Senate. That's basically all it is, and to sit in waiting to take over for the president. Go ahead.
Seat from Democrats to Republicans. That could happen even during this session of Congress.
So he's very worried that the people will have an input, that there will be a correction in this cycle, that the Republicans will take the House, they might even take the Senate, depending on what takes place. So he's saying, hurry up, destroy the country as fast as you can. Now, of course, that's exactly what they're doing. They're doing it by executive fiat, they're doing it by bureaucratic fiat and regulation, and they plan on doing more of it by legislative fiat through the phony budget process that they've put in place, reconciliation, which is supposed to be you reconcile House and Senate bills with the Republicans and the Democrats. That's not what it is. They ought to change the name. It's not reconciliation, it's ram it down their throats. Go.
27 of the 38 Congresses since World War II, the party in control of the Senate has changed during the session. Not to be morbid, but we also need to consider that this Senate has 6 Democratic senators over the age of 70 who are from states where a Republican governor would be free to replace them with a Republican should a vacancy occur.
I don't see widespread death on the Democrat side. Do you, ladies and gentlemen? No, I don't. Go ahead.
5 other Democratic senators are from states in which a Democratic vacancy would go unfilled for months until a special election was held to fill the seat, which itself would hand the GOP control of the Senate at least until that special election. It would be foolish to count on the Democrats increasing their numbers in the Senate or the House in the midterm elections of 2022. The president's party rarely, if ever, picks up more seats during midterm elections. The last time a Democratic president has not lost Democratic seats in Congress in his first midterm election was 1934. Meanwhile, state Republicans, who, not incidentally, control the majority of state governments, are proposing an avalanche of bills to make it harder
for voter suppression, to make it harder for people to vote, especially minorities. Sure they are. According to the Brennan Center for Justice, named after the radical left-wing Justice Brennan. Yes, they're making it harder for people to vote. They're not making it harder for people to vote. They're making voting lawful. I mean, how hard is it to vote? Really? You can actually go to the precinct and vote. You can actually vote early in virtually every state. Some of them have drop boxes that didn't have them before. Some of them will allow you to vote absentee even if you don't have a legitimate excuse. What is so hard about voting? Let me ask you, are there groups of people out there that are having difficulty voting? Well, who are they? Where are they? No, I don't think so. So it's like anything else. Any effort by the Republican legislatures to clean the voting lists, to make sure people who vote have identification, to make sure signatures match signatures, and to make sure absentee ballots are legitimate, that's voter suppression. Why? Because you're talking about a fraudulent party. That's why. It's a party of fraud. When they couldn't win, they would attack the Electoral College. Now they don't talk about the Electoral College, do they? They just want a system in place like California. And they want even more. Should a 16 and 17-year-old be able to register to vote? Well, that's in their proposal. Why? Should individuals be free to vote or citizens? But in their proposal, it's individuals. Wow. How about signature matching? Should that be allowed? That's outlawed. How about a voter ID? Should that be allowed? That's outlawed. How about if somebody votes in a different precinct from where they live? That's permitted. Well, how do you know they're not voting in 2 precincts at the same time? You don't. What happens if the list isn't right that you have? Can you clean it up? That is outlawed. You understand? This isn't about more voting. This is about fraud. Go.
Democratic constituencies to vote, including people of color, young people, and low-income people. Some states like Georgia have already put these voter suppression measures in.
Now notice he's not going to have a chart of what these voter suppression issues are. He's not going to discuss them. He's not going to discuss what the Democrats are proposing. Because when people hear what Georgia is doing and has done, and when people hear what the Democrats want to do, the population of this country rejects the Democrat proposal and embraces the Georgia law. Go ahead.
And with these state Republicans in
Stop. You see what I mean? He didn't explain it at all. Go.
The upcoming once-in-a-decade redistricting process, we could see even more gerrymandering.
Wow, we've never had gerrymandering before, have we, ladies and gentlemen? We've had gerrymandering since the beginning of the Republic. It's named after a former congressman named Jerry, was his last name. Gerrymandering. What they want to do is give it to some kind of a commission filled with experts. Then they'll take control of the commission as they take control of all bureaucracies and colleges and universities and all the rest of it. So they want more voting, but they want more technocrats in charge of setting congressional districts. Does that make sense to you? In other words, they want to fix the system. By that, I don't mean reform it. They want to fix it so they can't lose. They don't like losing the House, so they want to change gerrymandering. They don't like losing the Senate, so they want to add 4 more Senate seats from Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia. They don't like losing court decisions, even though they win many, so they want to change the Supreme Court and pack that court as well. They don't like losing votes, so they want to change the voting system to the California system so they never lose. They call this reform. They call this for the people. They call this opposing suppression. It's totalitarianism. That's exactly what it is. Go.
Meaning an even greater likelihood that Republicans gain ground in the House.
Isn't it amazing? All these systems have been in place from the start. Gerrymandering, the Electoral College, all these things. But all of a sudden, It's to the benefit of the Republicans. If we don't have voting in a way that anybody can basically do whatever they want, whenever they want, wherever they want, and you're not allowed to question them, that's voter suppression. Okay, if we all want to vote in Massachusetts, all of us who are in red states or purple states, and they say no, is that voter suppression? I mean, think about how stupid this is. Go.
Joe Biden and the Democrats are going to accomplish what a majority of Americans want them to, such as raising the minimum wage, expanding health care, strengthening unions.
You know what? A majority of Americans don't want the border open. A majority of Americans don't want welfare expanded the way they are with their so-called unemployment checks. The majority of Americans don't believe in abortion at the last second. The majority of Americans don't believe a lot of things the Democrats want to force. This is a republic based on the founding. The Constitution's based on the principles of the Declaration. So we're a republic with unalienable rights. It's not always majority rule. It's an amazing thing. If the Democrats move, they want majority rule, except when it comes to minorities, then they want minority rule. So they want majority rule when it helps them. They want minority rule when it helps them. They want gerrymandering when it helps them. They oppose gerrymandering when it doesn't help them. They want the filibuster. They used it over 300 times 2 years ago. And then they don't want the filibuster. They opposed open borders 12 years ago. Now they support open borders. I can go on and on and on. It's whatever works for them. The word is, don't follow the money, follow the power grab. Power. He wants to tell you the truth about the border because Robert Reich in Boston, as I recall, knows everything that's going on in McAllen, Texas. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, he's got a vacation home in McAllen, Texas, right on the border. Not.
The story you've heard about immigration from politicians and the mainstream media alike isn't close to the full picture. Here's the truth about how we got here and what we must do to fix it.
Yes, tell us, Rob. Tell us.
A desperate combination of factors are driving migrants and asylum seekers to our southern border, from Central America in particular. Deep economic...
All right, stop. They're coming from Southeast Asia, the Middle East, Africa, Eastern Europe, Central and South America. True diversity on our border. And they're coming in massive numbers because they were invited here. And despite all the propaganda from Biden and Harris and the rest of the reprobates there, the fact of the matter is they've been told, you want to get to the United States, now's the time to come. Gallup did the poll. It's in my book. We've talked about it. If just south of the border, if people had an opportunity, 42 million people south of the border would come to the United States. 42 million. Go.
Corruption and high rates of poverty.
I'm very confused. I don't mean to cut the little fellow off, but I'm very confused. When Donald Trump called these places S-holes, remember that? He was attacked as being a racist. Well, what effectively is Robert Reich calling these places? No, he doesn't use that phrase, but he said corruption and poverty and crime. Oh, yeah. People got to get out of there. They have no place to go. What's a refugee? A person escaping an S-hole place, right? So Trump says these are S-hole places. I can't believe you're talking that way. Oh, they're just trying to escape poverty and crime and corruption and brutality and murder and everything else. How dare you call them these places? Remember all that? Again, what's Robert Reich essentially saying? What's he saying? They're basically S-hole places. Go ahead.
COVID-19.
I didn't say that. He's saying it. Go ahead.
Violence and instability, much of it tied to historic U.S. support for brutal authoritarian regimes.
Oh, it's our fault. I forgot it's our fault. Because we supported brutal authoritarian regimes. As opposed to what? Communist regimes, which are never brutal and authoritarian, are they, ladies and gentlemen? Never. Go ahead.
And corporate interests in Latin America.
Okay, hold on. The Contras were good. They were freedom fighters. He talks about the corporate interests in Central and South America. Wow, that's really quite amazing. It's amazing how the left embraces corporations when the corporations do their bidding, like big tech or Jim Crow, the legislature in Georgia, trying to put rational election laws in place. But when corporations in Central and South America, big corporations. Go ahead.
Long-term consequences of this U.S. involvement have been the rise of violent transnational gangs and drug cartels.
So America's responsible for violent drug cartels, for corporate, whatever it is, for the corruption and the brutality of the regimes in Central and South America. I often wonder, how can you live in such a fabulous country and then wake up every day and hate it so much? And hate it so much. Go ahead.
The internal displacement of hundreds of thousands of people. And thanks to lax U.S. gun laws and export rules, a flood of firearms that regularly flows south makes this violence even worse.
So we're arming all the people down south. The illegal guns aren't coming from Central and South America into the United States, coming from China and Russia and other regimes. No. And by the way, that's where they're coming from. No, it's coming from the United States. We're responsible for everything that's going. And then you have to ask yourself, well, then why are all these people trying to get here? Why are they trying to get here? I mean, we're white supremacists. Most of them aren't white. We're the ones responsible for poverty, drugs, violence, all these things going on down there. Oh, yes, we are. So why are these people trying to come here? He's such a fool. Go ahead.
In other words, the United States is very much part of the root of this problem. Meanwhile, climate change-fueled natural disasters like droughts and hurricanes...
You see, America, climate change has done that, meaning capitalism. Those of you who've gotten this book, American Marxism, you're ahead of the curve. You're way ahead of the curve. The whole chapter on climate change, you would understand exactly what he's doing. The Marxist degrowth movement of the 1970s. You see, we're responsible. Lack of food, we're responsible for the droughts, we're responsible for all that going on all over the world. This is pure Americanized Marxism. That's exactly what it is. And I'll tell you, those of you who have the book, let me tell you what chapter it is. It's chapter 5, Climate Change Fanaticism. This is the attack on capitalism. Go ahead.
Widespread food insecurity in Central America, forcing thousands to migrate or risk starvation. Some politicians want you to believe the way to address this humanitarian tragedy is to double down on border security and build walls to deter people from coming. Well, they're wrong. Several administrations have tried this approach. It has failed every time.
No, it hasn't actually. It's actually worked. It worked under Trump. You know, the Democrats on the left like to praise Dwight Eisenhower as a president. They like to say he had a great temperament. He was a moderate Republican. He built the interstate highway system. You've heard them say this? Haven't you heard them say this, Mr. Producer? You know one of the things Dwight Eisenhower did? When he came into office, he called in a few of his generals, who he'd worked with obviously for some time. He said, you have 6 months. It's called Operation Wetback. I didn't make that up. It was called Operation Wetback. What was Operation Wetback? He said, round up, you have 6 months, you round up all the illegal aliens in this country and you ship them south of the border. And that's what he did. He shipped 1 million illegal aliens. They gathered them up. They rounded them up. They rounded them up, put them on buses, any type of vehicles, planes, and shipped them south of the border. It's called Operation Wetback. Look it up. And that they praise Eisenhower. They praise him. In many ways, he was a great president. Good president, not great president, great general. But they ignore that, the way they ignore FDR and how he rounded up Japanese Americans and Americans of Japanese descent. But Trump is the bad guy. Why? Because he wanted to build a border, a wall, and protect the border and wanted people to come in here, if they're coming in here, in a legal and responsible way. Well, he's a racist. Must be a racist. Yeah, it must be a racist. White supremacist. Go.
A recent study found that increased prosecutions and incarceration...
Shut up, you idiot. He's just a complete load, as we used to say. If you're in the media and you're one of the American Marxist mouthpieces in the media, you're a propagandist for the Democrat Party and these other movements, you're going to find Robert Reich to be convincing because he justifies your ridiculous propaganda and groupthink. All right, go.
The mainstream media has historically tried to balance left and right in its political coverage and present what it views as a reasonable center.
Telling both sides of a controversial story.
Funny he would turn to Walter Cronkite, because it turns out Walter Cronkite was a radical leftist. He decided that we needed to get out of Vietnam, whether you agree with him or not. That's not my point. My point is they took the Tet Offensive, in which the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong, some of you young folks probably don't even know who they were, put this massive offensive up against the United States and South Vietnamese military, and they were pushed back. They were actually defeated in that battle, even though it was a brutal battle. When Walter Cronkite was done reporting on it, you would have thought we lost. You would have thought we lost. So turns out he was not in the center at all. But go ahead.
Now that may sound good in theory, but the old politics no longer exists. And the former labels left versus right are outdated. Today, it's democracy versus authoritarianism.
Oh, it's democracy versus authoritarianism. Well, he's close. When it comes to authoritarianism, that's him and them, the American Marxists. What he's going to try and say, that's us. That's us. You watch these riots 2 summers ago. You watch the threats now, even in Kenosha, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, other radical leftists. You see what they're doing in Congress, how they want to turn the Constitution on its head, so there are very few limits, no separation of powers. You see how they want to centralize authority, how they want to destroy state authority when it comes to elections, and on and on and on. It's an amazing thing that your head can be so scrambled, like this guy Reich. They actually aren't even using the language right. You're calling white black and black white. Go.
Voting rights versus white supremacy. There's no reasonable center between these positions, no justifiable compromise. Equating them is misleading and dangerous.
When they say they're too far to the left.
It's Meet the Press. Fretting about the direction of the party.
You hear the mainstream media say, for example, that certain, quote, Republican and Democratic lawmakers are emerging as troublemakers within their parties, unquote. These reports equate Republican lawmakers who are actively promoting Trump's big lie that their 2020 election was stolen.
Whoa. For years, it's not the mainstream media. It is a propaganda operation. They pushed Russia collusion for years. They colluded with the Hillary Clinton campaign in the DNC. They colluded with the FBI and other federal law enforcement and intelligence agencies. They colluded with the Obama administration. They colluded to try and take out candidate Trump, then President-elect Trump, then President Trump, for years with this Russia collusion issue, which we knew all along was a fraud, and which now the entirety of the country and the world knows was a fraud. It was paid for, that dossier, by Hillary Clinton's campaign. They tried to divert attention from her criminality, her obstruction of justice, her perjury, her destruction of emails and software. You might remember all that. And that's what she did. They paid for this dossier. They washed it through the law firm of Perkins Coie, a Democrat firm. This guy, Michael Sussman, one of the lawyers for that firm, has since been indicted. The Russian, who became, I guess, an American citizen of some sort, who worked for Brookings Institute, was the entire source. He had no information whatsoever. The media went with the dossier. The FBI pushed the dossier. Comey met with candidate Trump, President-elect Trump, you'll remember, before he was sworn in, to talk to him about aspects of the dossier, basically to threaten him and let him know that the FBI had this hammer over his head. Then we had a criminal investigation related to it with the Mueller clowns and prosecutors. So he's talking about the media, the unequal media, that they are too harsh on the left, and the troublemakers in the Republican Party. You got to be kidding me. Go ahead.
With Democratic lawmakers who are fighting to extend health care and other programs to help people. But these are not equivalent.
They're not equivalent. They were fighting just to extend health care, to take care of the people. They're compassionate, not the right-wing or white supremacists. No. That's right. Tlaib, when she speaks anti-Semitism. Omar, when she speaks anti-Semitism. AOC, when she speaks anti-Semitism, when they embrace Hamas, a terrorist group recognized as such even by our own State Department, when they attack the United States of America constantly and defend communist China. That's right. These are just people who want to help Americans. These are just people who want more benefits for people. They're compassionate, unlike these right-wingers. You know, they're white supremacists. By the way, is he a white supremacist? He's white. He doesn't even understand critical race theory. The moron doesn't even understand that he's part of the dominant white culture under critical race theory, under this Marxist agenda. It doesn't matter how righteous or self-righteous in his case that he is. It doesn't matter how much he claims to defend minorities and so forth. He's part of the white dominant society, but this moron doesn't get it. Go.
Trump's big lie is a direct challenge to American democracy.
Oh, it's a direct challenge to American democracy. Woe is me, woe is me. No, the Democrat Party is a direct challenge to the American country and democracy since its founding. I mean, it's the Democrat Party that promoted slavery. It's the Democrat Party that was party of the Confederacy. That seems to me to have challenged and threatened democracy, republicanism, but I'll play his game. It's the Democrat Party that pushed for Plessy versus Ferguson and separate but equal that went on all the way to the 1950s till Brown versus Board of Education. It's the Democrat Party that stood in the schoolhouse doors to prevent little black kids from going to school with little white kids. It's the Democrat Party that pushed all these agendas, Jim Crow, literacy tests, poll taxes, and everything they could do to prevent blacks from voting. That's right. It's the Democrat Party in 1924 with the White Hoods that was marching through New York City, Manhattan of all places, Madison Square Garden, where they were holding their convention, and we're still promoting what? Lynching. Wow. Republican parties have never supported any of this. So when they talk about white supremacy, they're talking about themselves. When they're talking about reparations, they should pay for it, the Democrat Party. Go ahead.
Even if you disagree with providing Americans better access to health care, it's not going to destroy our system of government. You also hear that
Wait a minute. Better access to health care is not going to destroy our system of government? Oh, I see. Destroying the Electoral College, that will. Destroying separation of powers, well, that might. Destroying the independence of the Supreme Court, constantly threatening to pack the court, well, that could destroy it. Trying to eliminate the filibuster so there's no way to stop their agenda if they have a one-vote majority in the Senate and one-vote majority in the House, well, that could destroy it too, I'd say. Open borders where a country doesn't have its own sovereign landmass, I think that could destroy any society. There's not one that has survived that's ever had open borders. I see. Massive redistribution of wealth undermining our capitalist system, well, that could destroy our society too. Critical race theory? Yep, that too. Lat crit? Yep, that too. There's a lot they push that could destroy our society. Go.
Sides are gripped by equally dangerous extremism.
Both the radical right and the left.
Growing trend of far-right extremism.
The rise of left-wing mobs.
Far-right terrorists.
Labeling them radical left and radical right suggests that the responsible position somehow is between these so-called extremes. Can we get real? One side is trying to protect and preserve voting rights. The other side...
Oh, I see. I see. Drop boxes, signatures on ballots that are mailed in that are not having to be authenticated. I got it. 16 and 17-year-olds can register to vote under their proposal. Oh, that's just because they want everyone to vote. Oh, I see. People being able to vote without voter ID. Oh, yeah, that's another good one. People can vote in any precinct in the state. They don't have to vote in any particular precinct. Oh, that's not mischievous. No, not in the least. And on and on and on. Who are they kidding? They want to destroy the voting system. That's what they want to do. And then when they win and they get the votes, then they don't care who voted for them. They don't care about the public. Then they want to use the institutions of the bureaucracy to impose their will on us. Anybody heard of the OSHA mandates lately? Go.
Is trying to suppress votes under the guise of election integrity.
I see. Suppressing votes means requiring people to demonstrate they are who they say they are. Ensuring they vote once. Ensuring they have a right to vote, that they're a United States citizen. That's now suppressing votes. And not only that, suppressing minority votes. You know, there have been real journalists have gone into these various communities, asked various questions against the American Marxist narrative, and one of them Ami Horowitz, he went into a community, I think it was the Bronx, and he specifically spoke to African-American individuals and asked them if they thought voting ID was racist. And they mocked him, and they looked at him and said, what are you talking about? Well, is it difficult to get a vote, an ID? And they said no. And they were pulling out their licenses and pulling out other forms of identification and so forth. This is a ruse created by the Democrat Party in Washington, D.C., created by their phony pseudo-intellectuals, created by radical left white Marxists, and created by radical left minority critical race theory scholars. If you want to vote, there's no way to stop you from voting. And you even have the 1965 Civil Rights Act, often called the Voting Rights Act. And there's a provision in that act that stands to this day. If somebody has prevented you from voting because of your race, you have a federal cause of action. Federal. Where are all these federal causes of action? I don't see them, do you? If they exist, the media aren't reporting them, and Robert Reich isn't commenting on them.